Okay, Roy and Doris Vineyard Arrasmith. Roy Arrasmith was born on June 15, 1924 in Clinton County, Ohio. He was the youngest of 3 children born to Charles William Arrasmith and Lula Calhoun Arrasmith. And they were Della Calhoun Arrasmith, Charles Reeder Arrasmith, Roy Arrasmith, and Roy Arrasmith graduated from Reedsville High School in 1942. And that would be him. Doris Jean Vineyard was born in Sabina, Ohio on July 25, 1927 to Louis and Elsie Huffman Vineyard. She was number 8 of 9 children. Her siblings were Helen Walker, Mabel Robinson, Ogle, Earl Delmer, and Bernard Vineyard, Thelma Wilson, and Wilma Wilson. Doris Jean Vineyard graduated from Sabina High School in 1945. And don't I look like her?
Sure.
So does Mom. He went to work at Mac Tool after returning home from the Navy at the end of World War II. He also worked at NCR in Dayton, drove a dump truck for Melvin Stone Quarry, and a semi-truck for Gateway. During his time at Mac Tool, he met and married Doris Vineyard on May 4, 1947. Roy and Doris had 3 children, all of them girls. The firstborn was Linda Diane Anders on June 2, 1948, and the next 2 were twins, Janice and Joyce, born on September the 11th, 1949. While waiting for the birth of the twins, which were a surprise, he built the family's first home in Plainview. In 1958, they needed more room, so he built their second home right across the street on Grand Avenue. Doris continued to live there until 2001 when Janice, Joyce, and she decided to build a home together. Roy was a man of great work ethics, and Doris was the best stay-at-home mother for most of the girls' school years. She enjoyed being in the Sabina Mothers Club, being a room mother, helping with the twins' brownie troop, and was a member of the Sabina Church of Christ, where she first attended in 1933. Before Janice and Joyce graduated, she went to work at the Sabina Post Office sorting mail for a short time, and then she worked at Leadex in Wilmington, Ohio, where she retired after 22 years. Going to work was their way of helping Joyce to earn a college degree to become a teacher. In the early 1960s, Roy went to work for Russell Stewart at the SKS service station, and a couple years later, he bought the station, changed the name to the Sabina Service Center, and Citgo took over as the gas supplier. That's what I remember.
Colors look better than it does now.
I didn't even know we had that picture. I don't remember even seeing it. The summer of 1965, Roy and Doris also leased the A&W Rupert stand, which all 3 of the girls worked. Some of the other girls that worked there that summer were Bonnie Armstrong, Marilyn Rittenhouse, and Anna Lee Mercer. Doris's sister Wilma and Geneva Crow also worked as cooks. The year of 1977 brought a change to their lives. Dad had been a member of the Sabina Council for a while, and in June he finished Ed Hodges' term as mayor. We don't remember the circumstances of what happened to Ed. We think that Dad enjoyed being mayor, and from what we have been told, he was a pretty good one. There might be one person that doesn't agree, because every year when we decorate the graves, within a short time the flowers are always missing from his headstone.
Might go back and just mention the other members in there, if you can see.
Yeah.
Up here.
Yeah. Roy Lynch, Jim Clouser, Dwight Holmes, Tom Wood, clerk in the back, Ed Hodge, Herman Newman, Roy, and Jim Iger.
Dad might have used his mayor ID card one time to his advantage. I heard this story. We laugh about it now, but once during a trip to Florida, he was going a little too fast and was pulled over by a patrolman. When asked for his ID, he kind of made sure that the officer saw his mayor ID at the same time. Needless to say, he was only given a warning. Roy was a very empathetic person and wasn't one to seek out praise, but preferred being in the background. He was always willing to help anyone who was in need. He was instrumental in the purchase of the three-wheel scooter for Toby Weichel and George Crow. He gave away many gallons of gas to those needing to get to their doctor or stranded motorists trying to get back home. Roy was also active in the Sabina Lions Club and organizing parades and an annual candy sale. Roy retired from the service station in the late 1980s. He and Doris enjoyed a couple years spending winters in Florida with their daughter Diane, but shortly after, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. After the diagnosis, Doris retired to care for him at home with the help of Janice and Joyce. He passed away on November 7th, 1994. There were funny times during that time period. Some that I remember that we used to laugh about was with Alzheimer's. It's a hard thing, but my Lord, sometimes they drive you crazy. And so we get in the car, and every time he had to eat when we got in the car, and would ask if we were going to Wendy's to get a hamburger and a Frosty. He had to have a hamburger and Frosty, and we pretty much, Mean would get it for him. That's what I call my grandma. Mean would get it for him while we were out. But one of the funniest times was, and for those that knew my grandma, he, at Mom's house, at our house in Florida, Papa would go out and check the mail all the time, and he'd walk out, and he'd come back in, and he forgot he had gone. And so he'd say, as the mailing come around the bend and out again, because we lived on this like curve around this golf course. And so Mean would just, I was like, just tell him no, just let him go, you know, because he would just keep asking. So he would go out and check and out and check. Well, then he didn't come back one time. And my grandmother was like, where is Roy? We went out and he couldn't find it. He didn't know his way back. He was just standing in the middle of the yard. And he was peeing in the yard, and she was so embarrassed. And I was like, Mean, don't worry about it. No one's going by. Just get him come back in. So it's just sad, those things, you know, that happen. But, you know, you have those funny moments. And then he also used to walk back and forth across town, which some of you may remember that are older. He would walk from Grand Avenue out to the station and back every day. And his heart was so strong from walking that was the last thing, you know, like his body shut down with Alzheimer's, but that was the last thing that went just because he walked so much.
Margene would watch for him. Tom, where are you?
I'm way back here.
Okay, Margene would watch him as he would walk out to the station and back, and she'd always call Mom and say, okay, he's halfway through town.
And they just watch him because he'd just walk across the road, wouldn't stop for traffic or anything. But after Roy's passing, Doris's girls would take her on trips to Florida, out west, to Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, and Las Vegas, to name a few. She was most happy doing these things with her girls. She enjoyed her 3 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren. On November 7th, 2013, she lost one of her twins. Janice got us to cancer. On July 2017, Diane and Joyce had a 90th birthday celebration for her at the Cove. 6 months later, we learned that Mom had breast cancer, and she passed peacefully away at home with her family around her on June 14, 2018.
You were talking about Roy's generosity at the station. He had this little wooden square with a nail in it, and if he would do some kind of service for you, he put that on there. That was his record keeping. And that thing, all the edges were black because they work on cars. And that thing, I'm sure the day he sold the station, that thing was full of where people hadn't paid him. You know, it was just like he took care of them and marked it down there, and they didn't ever come back and settle up with them. And I remember as a kid, they had a fridge, and they kept their candy bars in there. Nothing better than a cold Reese cup.
Yes.
To this day.
Yeah.
My grandmother, we had to teach her how to pump gas because she didn't know how, because Papa always took her car out and made sure it was full and everything. And so then after Papa passed away, we had to show her how to pump her gas, because she still got around and everything for many years after he passed. And so we had to teach her how to do that after he passed away.
He was really funny. And we bought our house that our backyards butted up together. And we bought ours in '76, and we're always out in the backyard planting something. Roy comes over and says, "Not gonna grow." We're supposed to, wasn't gonna grow. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't.
Roy worked for my dad. My dad had the station first, when it was first built.
Before busing.
And then Russ was my dad's brother, and he came in with Rod Nicely, and that's when it was SKS. And then Dad went on to work, take over Sahigro. So, like I said, I remember Roy being out there. He used to give us girls a hard time when we come in there. But I think my dad had a refrigerator too with the candy bars. In fact, when there was a little shack there first, and Dad sold bread and pork and beans, he had the weird little grocery items out that end. Yeah, before Sidco built the new station.
And if I may, one more thing, sorry, but the little chariots that they bought for Toad Michael and for George Crow, it changed those guys' lives.
Yes, it did.
They were both
Yeah.
in wheelchairs, and they could get in that thing and just go
Yeah.
everywhere. That was before scooters and things like that, so, yeah, that was remarkable. And they just backed their wheelchairs up and go wherever they wanted to, so.